Hello everyone, and thank you once again for joining us for this Sunday's Alaska weather on this sixth day of May 2018. Up first on the breakup map, not a lot of changes from yesterday here, although Dehne seems to be working down a little bit farther downstream. Otherwise, all the northern rivers here still all ice. Back out to the west, the Yukon. I still believe Yukon's forecast to start breakup here over the next couple of days. Otherwise, there's a ice jam flood warning out. Barely see it there. Red spot, that's for the lower Calskag. And that's an ice jam flood warning on the Kuskokwim River due to an ice jam at Coffee Bend. And water is over the bank and flooding the village's main road there. And that's expected to continue probably through tomorrow. Moving on to satellite imagery, you can see remains of a weakening low center drifting northward here that came up from farther to the south several days ago. Kept areas of snow and snow showers going across the entire area there with, of course, cloudy skies extending into the central interior here, but about Fairbanks eastward. Seeing a little bit of sunshine, clouds up across the North Slope, Arctic Coast, and Brooks Range with some scattered snow showers going on up there. A little more continuous back here to the southwest, and then those taper off as you head south into the Yukon Delta, becoming isolated. Rain and snow showers here over the southwest interior into the southern Kuskokwim Valley. Now, mass of moisture sliding northward here, bringing rain, not particularly heavy. Seward since midnight picked up about 2/10 of an inch since midnight there, with lighter amounts in Cook Inlet and just clouds coming in over the Copper River Basin, maybe a few showers. Big storm out here to the west, bringing rain up to an inch since midnight, falling at AKwx with wind gusts in advance of the front of anywhere from 50 to 60 miles an hour, so gale force winds associated with that. Clouds spreading up to the Pribilof Islands, but non-rain producing clouds spreading up to the Pribilof Islands over toward the eastern Aleutians, but precipitation just off to the west and southwest there. Pretty good break here showing up over the Bristol Bay area, southeast Bering. Snow finally ending at Bethel earlier today, and temperatures rising in the lower 40s this afternoon. Kodiak Island right there, the state airport right on the edge of the clouds. Sunshine back to your west. Southeast coast really dried out today. Sunshine, temperatures in the 60s over the southern areas. You see some of this high-level cloudiness streaming back in over the northern areas during the afternoon hours. And on the chart here, that mass of clouds here to the south associated with a weak warm front. That moisture sliding northward around, building high pressure aloft over western Canada. And again, the showers along the coast, mixed rain and snow showers over the southern and southwest interior to Bristol Bay, and then the snow up here over the northwest. Winds pretty light over much of the area. Big storm out here to the west over the Bering Sea with gale force winds covering quite a large area here, all around the center, back to the north, northerly gales, gusts 45 miles an hour into Shimia with numerous rain showers there, and rain all along this zone during the day today, tapering off lighter amounts behind the front, but again, AKwx picking up an inch since about midnight. And rain has yet to reach the eastern Aleutians, the Alaska Peninsula, but the forecast for tonight, that will push eastward here with rain and wind, gale force winds coming into the eastern Aleutians, and increase in the winds for the Alaska Peninsula after midnight, with rain reaching possibly Sand Point. Definitely windy, rainy conditions for the Pribilof Islands with gale force winds. Chance of rain, or maybe rain or snow mix, but either case it'll be pretty light. Start to see an increase in the winds after midnight, especially toward morning here along the southwest coast. Otherwise, pretty nice, kind of a break in between there. High pressure building in south central Alaska. Be some lingering rain and snow showers tonight over south central Alaska. That area of moisture will shift north and then east and begin to dissipate here. So let's clip the Kenai Peninsula, but it looks like it'll be a kind of an occasionally wet night for the North Gulf Coast, some of that into the Copper River Basin. Northern Panhandle start to see an increase in a decrease in those clouds. Southern areas start picking up a little bit of moisture there, isolated showers that will probably linger into tomorrow. So more clouds with a couple of showers around, pretty isolated though as far as shower activity goes. That'll hold the temperatures down probably closer to 60 in the southern areas, and variable clouds on up to the north. Mostly sunny, south central Alaska, Copper River Basin, North Gulf Coast, some clouds, but light winds right up into the interior, partly and mostly sunny or partly and mostly cloudy if you're a little farther to the west here. Wind and rain on the increase southwest coast here. Still so possible gale force winds with this tomorrow afternoon. And some moisture could reach St. Lawrence Island by the late afternoon. Otherwise, decreasing snow showers up here over the North Slope, Brooks Range, and the Arctic coast, but kind of lingering there for the central and eastern coast. And widespread area showers or rain, especially back to the west. We'll see those northerly winds out of the north. Gale force northerly winds for the western Aleutians starting to subside out towards Shimmy and Attu west of Amchitka Island. And then for the outlook for Tuesday, high pressure in over southern Alaska here, right over Prince William Sound, but southeast flow around that, both at the surface and aloft, be dragging a lot of moisture in off the Pacific. So in spite of the surface high here, you're going to have increasing rainfall going on for the southern Kenai Peninsula, sliding up into western Prince William Sound during the afternoon. Also western Cook Inlet to the eastern slopes of the Alaska Range. Looks wet and breezy here across all of the southwest coast, even the interior from the Yukon Delta, especially the Kuskokwim Delta, Bristol Bay to Kodiak Island. Very wet day coming up Monday. Partly sunny, Copper River Basin, northern Susitna Valley to just outright sun over this Tanana Valley there with could see mid-60s for highs in this area with sunshine even up to the North Slope, possibly the Arctic coast. And the southeast coast loses the shower threat, just a few clouds around with partly, maybe mostly sunny conditions, especially most of the sun will be over toward the border. And for the lows tonight, shaping up like this, lower to mid-40s, mild down in the south there. Lower 40s to the north, lower to mid-30s here, south central Alaska, mid-20s possible to Copper River Basin, higher valley areas, lower 30s northeast interior to upper 20s in the central part of the state, 5 to 10 here on the eastern central Arctic coast, mid-20s from the Noatak Valley across the Seward Peninsula out to St. Lawrence Island, and then about 30 from Akoriak, upper 20s to the Yukon Kuskokwim Delta, and mid to upper 30s for the Aleutians. Highs for tomorrow. Lower 40s here for the Adak-Atka area, 40s to lower 50s, south central Alaska, same thing for the Tanana, upper Yukon Valley areas, mid-20s along the Arctic coast, lower to mid-30s for the Brooks Range. Highs a little cooler, as I mentioned, 55 to 62 for the Panhandle, 40s for the Kodiak Island area and the North Gulf Coast. Lows the following morning, still in the 40s here for the southeast coast, and teens, kind of a warm up there. Or a little bit, yeah, back above 10 degrees anyway, 10 to 15 for the Arctic coast, North Slope areas, lower to mid-30s out over the southwest, and for the Aleutians, mid to upper 30s, or roughly the mid-30s, with upper 30s for the Alaska Peninsula into Bristol Bay, and right around 40 there for the greater Kodiak Island area. Tanana Valley, lower to mid-30s, above freezing, could drop down to 25 though over toward Eagle, and freezing or below North Waitok into the higher valleys of the Copper River Basin. And for high temperatures, mid to upper 50s for the Tanana Valley there, with mid-60s possible for the southeast coast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Looking for some IFR here for Monday morning, eastern Arctic coast, much of the Brooks Range, especially south of the mountains there, in across the northwest interior. IFR, quite a batch here out over the Bering Sea with that next incoming system spreading east and a little to the northeast there. IFR starting the day out over the Wrangell Mountains, otherwise marginal VFR for the North Gulf Coast across all the Copper River Basin up to the Alaska Range, and VFR for the Panhandle. That holds through the day, but looks like marginal VFR getting in close to Prince of Wales Island. Good VFR here, Gulf of Alaska, eastern and central interior up to the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, marginal back to the west, and areas of marginal VFR here over the southwest interior, but the IFR staying along or off the coast there, Nunivak Island, all the way back down across the Pribilofs into the central Aleutians. And then for Tuesday morning, IFR back in the picture across all the Arctic coast, portions of the North Slope, especially the central areas, south of the Brooks Range or from the Brooks Range south here toward Prince William Sound, VFR conditions. Marginal VFR with IFR here, Kodiak Island, slipping on up, trying to get into southern Cook Inlet, but definitely into Kachemak Bay for Tuesday morning, and quite an area of IFR here over the northern Bering Sea, right down along the coast, in across the Kilbark Mountains, central Aleutians, and IFR also slipping into the southern southeast coast, but that goes away, burns off for the next day, or for the afternoon for Tuesday there. IFR in across, western Prince William Sound, southern coast of the Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak Island, especially on the eastern side of the island, you find the lowest conditions. Eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range, IFR will be on the increase. Kuskokwim Valley, though, VFR. Much of the northern interior to the Arctic coast and the east side here looks really good with widespread VFR. Widespread IFR, northern Bering Sea here. Nunivak Island, western St. Lawrence Island, maybe St. Paul right on the edge, and north of the Aleutians, where otherwise will be marginal. And for the passes, Anatuvik, marginal VFR improves to VFR conditions, probably toward midday, give or take, but it looks like Adigan will stay marginal at times throughout the entire day. Lake Clark and Merrill, though, marginal early on, becoming VFR later in the morning. Through the afternoon, rainy, same trend, windy, same forecast, marginal becoming VFR. And Isabel, marginal VFR, also early on, will become VFR during the morning. And Mentasta may take toward late morning or into noon before it becomes VFR there. Tanita, marginal VFR, improving as well to VFR conditions. And Portage will be VFR the entire day, while Chilcoot and White, occasionally marginal. Freezing levels here shows 8 to 10,000 feet here across the Panhandle, and keeping the temperatures in the lower 60s, especially over the southern areas there. But quite a gradient here right across Yakutat, falling to about 2,000 feet there. Cold air aloft still in place over the much of interior Alaska, Bering Sea, but we do have 2,000 feet nudging northward toward the Pribilof Islands. And for icing, occasional widespread moderate here with that system. A lot of moisture coming in, light isolated moderate there in this shaded area, but the orange showing considerable moderate there, terrain induced along the Alaska Peninsula at Unalaska Island. Jet stream, here's the upper level low associated with that system coming in. Split flow right here, southerlies 90 knots up and over the ridge there from the southeast coast in across southern Alaska. And at 9,000 feet, pretty strong winds with that system there at, 35 to 50 knots here coming across the Alaska Peninsula, increasing to 35 southwest coast, 20 to 30 there along the Alaska Range. Maybe 30 knots across the northern Panhandle, and that flow coming up following the gradient, the thermal gradient there, but lighter to the south, fairly light over the interior east side there, 10 to 15. And then for 3,000 feet west of that low center, both at 3 and 9,000 feet, pretty strong northerlies coming in, 35 to 55 knots. Southeast, 40 to 50 knots here across the Alaska Peninsula, 35 to 40, that'll be increasing in the afternoon along the southwest coast, even the interior, 25 knots there. Lighter though under ridging over the southeast interior, just 5 knots, and fairly light winds 10 to 15 for the Panhandle. Northern interior out to the Arctic coast, 10 to 15 knots from the southwest. And taking a look at turbulence, this will be increasing from west-southwest to east-northeast throughout the day. So becoming considerably moderate on the turbulence side, especially for small aircraft here along the southwest coast, Nunivak Island, down across the Alaska Peninsula, and all of the Aleutian chain there, with increasing turbulence, Kodiak Island, northeast Bristol Bay, and the southwest interior throughout the afternoon.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider. As you well know, you can get forecast information for any day of the week. Today, tonight, tomorrow, out to 6 or 7 days. It includes the high and low temperature, the wind direction, the chance of rain or snow in your part of Alaska. But did you know that there is information available to forecast out to 2 weeks? So the question is, how would you use that information? And here to answer that question today and tell us a lot more about climate services from the U.S. National Weather Service Alaska region is Rick Toman. He's the program manager for the Climate Science and Services. And Rick, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
How would we use information that is out to 2 weeks instead of just the high and low and the chance of rain?
Well, Dave, as we move out in time, of course, forecasts become more uncertain. So as we move into that second week from now, we're not looking at specific highs or lows or precipitation amounts at any given place. What we can do with the state of the science at this point is get a handle on patterns. So we can say things like increased chances for stormy weather in the Bering Sea in 2 weeks, or we've been in a cold weather pattern, looks like 8 to 10 days from now, that pattern's going to change. Those are the kind of forecasts that we can currently make in that second week.
So you're increasing lead time for perhaps big or small weather events and telling us the likelihood of maybe more coastal storms or wind events in some areas?
Those are the kinds of things that that we hope to be able to let Alaskans know in the second week forecast. And if you have an activity or an event that you would find that kind of advance notice useful, whether it's moving stuff off of the beach, whether to go out hunting or to come back from camp, those kind of decisions, the week 2 provides the opportunity for you to get a handle on that kind of information.
Okay. What other type of weather impacts that we're familiar with might Alaskans use climate services for?
Well, in the forecast realm, we can go provide some information from this week 2, say the 8 to 14 day period, on out to the monthly and even seasonal time scale. Now, those monthly seasonal forecasts are still kind of just really very much pattern dependent, and the amount of detail that we can provide at this point is still pretty limited. Generally, indications of how temperature and precipitation will fall in maybe above normal, below normal kind of range. But in the week 2 period, we can be considerably more specific than that as far as the general patterns and really the impacts on Alaskans.
Okay, so we would be talking about generalizations there that would tell us that the period might be more stormy, might be more hot, more dry, more cold, and situations like that.
That's correct. So we're not going to be able to say in which community, for instance, there's the threat of coastal flooding, but we can often be able to tell we're moving into a pattern that would be conducive to big Bering Sea storms. So if you're in an area that could potentially impact you, you'll want to pay attention to the weather forecast.
Okay. Now, every day and every hour of the day, the National Weather Service is working on a forecast for the next day. But how do you start your forecast process for that extended period that goes out beyond 7 days?
Well, the way things work right now, we start off with the expected general flow pattern for Alaska and the whole world, really, and then we narrow that down to Alaska. So we start off with the basic computer model forecast. There's quite a few different computer models that we look at, bring those together. And then another important part of that is we attempt to assess the confidence. The reality is often 2 weeks away, the computer models are very divergent. They have lots of different solutions, and that's an indication that we don't have much confidence. But when we see more agreement in that time frame, and when that agreement is a pattern that will be potentially very impactful for Alaska or is a big change from what we've been in, that's when we can then take that expected pattern. We have computer models forecasting it. We've assessed the confidence. Now we can move that forward. How, using our experience as Alaskan weather forecasters, how does that typically play out for Alaska? So is this a stormy pattern for the Bering Sea? Is this an extra rainy period for Southeast? Is this the kind of pattern that generates strong winds potentially in the Anchorage Bowl? Is this a deep cold pattern for the interior? All of those are the kind of things that we're looking at in these large-scale patterns. That's very different than telling you that the winds on 10 days from now are going to be gusting to 120 on the hillside. We're looking for patterns, not the very specific information that the Weather Service will then hone in on as the event gets closer.
So the idea is to keep the 5, 6, 7 day forecast the same, where you are getting the standard high and low temperature and the chance of wind or rain, but further out you get a broad general forecast, but as the time gets closer to that event, we'll get a lot more specific.
That's correct.
Okay, very good. So how can people use this information if I am out in the bush and I want to see, is a coastal storm expected in my region, or is a chance for that improving over the next 2 to 3 weeks? Where could I go to get information like that?
When we see that potentially impactful or a big change in the weather is coming 8 to 14 days out, typically we will start to highlight that on the Weather Service Facebook site. We might produce a YouTube video highlighting that, linking that on our Facebook site. So often we don't, at this point, we don't have much to say in that because we're really looking for those forecasts of opportunities. But one thing we can say very likely as we go through the next 2 or 3 years, there'll be more and more of this kind of forecast information available in that week 2 time frame.
Okay, and something that emergency managers and city planners and folks in villages might be interested in keeping an eye out for, looking for that information to be headlined, whether that's on social media or perhaps through the National Weather Service channels there to get information from you to make better plans a little bit longer term and make better preparations in the event that things become a little bit more unsettled.
Absolutely. Climate Services with the National Weather Service Alaska region is talking to the state of Alaska every week, apprising them of that 2-week outlook. And on the social media side, we are working to keep Alaskans informed so that when we think we have some confidence in a high impact or a big change, that's the best way right now for folks to find out about that. Twitter, Facebook, so stay tuned to your National Weather Service.
Very good, a developing program. Rick Thoman with the National Weather Service Alaska region. He's a Climate Science and Services Program Manager. Thanks so much for joining us again, Rick, and I hope to have you back again soon.
Great, thanks Dave.
For another edition of Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider. We'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis. Not a lot of difference from yesterday with sea ice free here up into the Bering Strait in a narrow zone there, and less than a 1/10 inch ice, still about the same as it's been the last couple days here, and really not much change expected. Everything will be holding kind of in a stationary status quo for the next 2 or 3 days. And for the southeast coast, northwest winds at 15 knots with seas running anywhere from 6 to 8 feet. There we go. And then over the Lynn Canal, south 20 knots, seas 4 feet. South winds at 10 here with 2-foot seas for Stevens Passage. And Clarence Strait, south winds 15 with 3-foot seas. And for Lynn Canal next day, winds swing around to the north, or stay north, but pretty light, 10 knots, 2-foot seas, northwest 15 for Stevens Passage, and even lighter for Clarence Strait. East winds on the south coast at 15, turn north at 10 on the north coast there. So pretty light winds coming up for Tuesday here, and then back around to the east, but those seas 4 or 5 feet, and that's about it. Prince William Sound, southwest, 10 knots, 2-foot seas, northeast at 10 here. For the eastern North Gulf Coast, southwest 10 for the western zone. Barren Islands, east 15, east 25, so we got some small craft advisories for Ketchimak Bay, and Cook Inlet, light northeast winds with slight seas. And then those winds pick up considerably on Tuesday. Small craft advisories for all of Cook Inlet, 25 with 30-knot winds south of the Forelands. Full gales here for the Barren Islands and Ketchimak Bay with seas up to 14 feet there into the bay. And for the western North Gulf Coast, east winds 30 knots, falling back to 20 here off to the east. Prince William Sound, northeast 15, sea still at 2 feet. And for Kodiak Island, southeast winds here on the eastern coast, those eastern marine zones, Shelikof Strait, east 15. And for Bristol Bay, southeast increasing to 30 knots, seas building to 7 feet. And good gales here for the Alaska Peninsula, southeast 40, seas approaching 20 feet. In the Pacific side, small craft advisories, Castle Cape to Sitkinak. And then from Castle Cape to Sitkinak for Tuesday, those fall back down to 20 knots. But we've got small craft advisories here for Kodiak Island, Shelikof Strait, with east wind Shelikof Strait right out across over the range and through Bristol Bay there. And south-southeast, 25 to 30 knots to the Alaska Peninsula. And out west, almost a storm, but not quite. North-northwest, 45 knots here on the western side of that low center here that's drifting northward into the southern Bering Sea. 25 knots, looks like gales here on the Pacific side of the Aleutians, central Aleutians, and 40 knots from the south-southeast for the Fox Islands with 20-foot seas. And then for Tuesday, south winds 30 knots, gales now north of Unalaska Island, 35 knots with 30 to 40 knot winds from the west turning northwest here for the central Aleutians. with seas up as high as 20 feet. Pacific side, Bering Sea side, about 15 feet. Northwest 40, and then those drop off to 30 knots from, say, Kiska Island out to Shimia. Southwest coast, gales tomorrow, that front moving in, so east-southeast 35 to 40 knots, 40-knot winds for St. Matthew Island, southeast 30, because you get gales tonight for the Pribilofs, and then 30 knots tomorrow, 15-foot seas, east 30 for St. Lawrence Island, and east 20 for Norton Sound. No change in Norton Sound's winds for Tuesday. 25 knots, St. Lawrence Island, east at 30 for the entire southeast, southwest coast, northeast 25, St. Matthew Island, east 30, 14-foot seas for the Pribilofs. And up along the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, light easterlies at 10, central coast 15, extending to the west side, Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson, north 15, Cape Thompson to Wales, southwest 15. And then 15 to 20 knot winds here, strongest from Cape Thompson to Wales, 20 knots, otherwise 15 out of the east on the western coast. Southeast 10 to 15, become more easterly toward demarcation point. Tonight, big storm pushing in. Again, gale force winds and rain spreading eastward, Pribilofs down across the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, and those gale force northerlies back out to the west there with lighter winds now coming into the central Aleutians. This moisture dissipating, light rain along the North Gulf Coast, shifting eastward. Isolated showers showing up in the Panhandle, starting to diminish the snow there with that weakening low continuing to pull off, and just a weak trough right through here with some isolated snow showers for tomorrow, mainly the western Arctic coast. Mostly sunny through the central interior, right on down to the North Gulf Coast. Wind and rain, gale force winds there coming into the southwest areas with mostly sunny skies for the Panhandle on Tuesday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.